Yes, Jack Hermansson just beat Joe Pyfer in a 5-round decision, 48-47 in the Apex as the main event. And I'm going to be going over through the entire card and kind of breaking down the fights that happened and some good performances, some bad performances, and basically all the above. So let's start off with the main event. Jack Hermansson just humbled Joe Pyfer. After being down 2-0. He comes back and secures the win, winning 3 rounds of 2. And how did he do it? Well, early on, the boxing defense was really there for Hermansson. Pyfer was landing early in the first round and then taking control in the second. And then all of a sudden, Jack Hermansson is moving his head really well, blocking very well. And that's what led him to start beating up Joe Pyfer. And then in the third round, Jack Hermansson takes over and is hitting him with the calf kick, jabbing him all day. Joe Pyfer, we might have to talk about him being a little bit one-dimensional, at least when it comes to the stand-up, because outside of really the 1-2 and body punch and a calf kick, he's not really landing much. And that was evident tonight. And I want to see him improve his skills. And I think he can, right? He's only 27 years old. And this is a learning experience because going into this fight, the one thing I was worried about for Joe Pyfer was the cardio. Was it going to be good enough to go 5 rounds? With a guy like Hermansson, who's done 5 rounds many times before. So I was worried about that for Pyfer. But I thought, you know what? He'll figure it out. I mean, this guy is one of the hungriest guys in the UFC. And just wasn't there tonight. But, you know, I'm expecting still big things from Joe Pyfer. I just think right now he needs to maybe go back into the camp, start working on some more skills, and improve his cardio. And I think he'll be right there because you could see it in the first 2 rounds. He is really athletic for 185, and he's big. He really is big. He looked a lot bigger than Hermansson, even though the stature was kind of the same. He just looked bigger. And early on, he imposed his will. It worked. Then once Hermansson put him on the back foot, then that's when the game changed, right? That's when he could start landing those low kicks, start jabbing them up. And ultimately, this was just a great win for Hermansson. I mean, he's been out for over a year now, and coming back and beating a rising contender that was supposed to be kind of a layup matchup for Pyfer. I was kind of confident going into this one that Joe Pyfer would win this, but Jack Hermansson proved me wrong. This was a really, really good win for Jack Hermansson. And I would like to see him fight Nasruddin Imavov next, actually. That would actually be a good fight. I mean, he said it in the post-fight speech, and it would make sense. Like, Nasruddin Imavov kind of almost fights like him, like Joe Pyfer, that is. But he's a little bit more slick and can get out of the way of Jack Hermansson's pesky attacks that he throws, right? Where he's, you know, kicking you at range, jabbing you at range, and then he blitzes, right? With not much on it, right? Not much on it, but he's landing and it's really efficient. And for Joe Pyfer, I don't know what's next. I want to see him back in the gym, working on the skills, getting better cardio. And I think that it was just a learning experience. Like, look, he was up 2-0. And this is a close fight, even though it might not reflect it when you rewatch it because Hermansson took over and you're like, all right, Hermansson won the fight. But you got to count rounds, right? And he won 2 of them. And this is going to be a learning experience for him. So, you know, I hope he goes in and, you know, really works on the fine-tuned skills. Maybe have a more diverse punching bag. Not actual punching bag, but a punching bag, like tools, you know? Anyways. Yeah, I want to see that from Joe Pyfer because, you know, this was a humbling experience for him, obviously. I mean, you could hear it in the post-fight speech when, you know, he didn't make any excuses. He was saying, you know what? He beat me with the calf kick, and he just was better tonight. He was. And I like to see that from Joe Pyfer because that means, you know, he can be humble in defeat. And hopefully this will make him work even harder because he is really talented. He's got extreme athleticism, extreme power. And if he can really mix a good bag together and mix a good skill set together, he's going to be really dangerous. But tonight, unfortunately, Jack Hermansson gets this one done. And I got my pick wrong. So, yeah, what a win from Jack Hermansson. Dan Ige flatlines Andre Fili, and I got that pick right. I thought Ige would take it to another decision, just thinking that Fili would, be able to dodge some of the attacks and get out of range for most of them, because he was the longer guy. But you almost forget that Dan Ige's got sick power in his hands, because he displayed it again, and I didn't even have a reaction to it. I didn't have a reaction. I was just like, my reaction was stillness. I'm like, oh my God. Like, you forget that Dan Ige's got the power with him, and it makes him dangerous, right? It makes him really, really dangerous. Because how many power punchers are there in the featherweight division? Not many. I mean, Ilya Taporia, Josh Emmett, that's kind of it. And Dan Ige can really, really climb the ranks here if he can find good matchups, start to do what he does to the unranked guys to the ranked guys. So, yeah, and for Andre Fili, this was a very sad moment for him, because he finally gets to fight back in the rankings, put together some great wins, and gets knocked down in round 1. That's tough. It really is tough. I feel bad for him. I wouldn't say I'm a big Andre Fili fan, but respect, respect to Andre Fili. But yeah, Dan Ige, wow. I don't know who he's going to fight next, because he's fought a lot of the guys in the top 15. At least in the range where, it would make sense for him to fight. So it'd be interesting. I don't know who they're going to go with. But yeah, this is a great win for Dan Ige. Hey, he's that gatekeeper of the top 15, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, that was a great win for Dan Ige. Let's go on to the next one. RoboCop knocks out Brad Tavares in the 3rd round, and Brad Tavares is really tough, guys. That was a really tough, hard-fought match from both guys. But ultimately, it came down to the skill and the power and the youthness of RoboCop, right? Brad Tavares has been in these wars, right? He's been in wars where he's been really damaged. And a guy like RoboCop, who has really good power, I would figure that RoboCop would kind of, be the better guy in that, right? Even though Brad Tavares is tough and it's kind of really hard to knock him out, he's been knocked out before, right? But he's just so known as being this tough, hard-nosed guy to get out of there. A tough out, you would say. And like that, RoboCop kind of put it on him from the beginning. And I kind of figured a finish was going to come either in round 2 or round 3 after what we saw in the 1st round. One thing about RoboCop that I'm a little worried about in future fights is the head movement, because when he blitzes and when he's throwing combinations, that head is just straight on and no movement to it, and he gets popped a lot. He gets hit with a lot of hard shots. And if he's anything serious, and if he's anything that the UFC can use as a potential star in the middleweight division, because there's a lot of guys outside the rankings in the middleweight division who are really, really good, and he could be one of them. He's a sneaky name. So if he can fine-tune that a little bit and, really, really impose his will, because he's got everything. He really does. I mean, he's got sick power. He's got great ground game. He's got everything. So for him, I just want to see a little bit more. But he keeps finishing people, which is really nice to see. And I don't know who they're going to give him next, because it's an interesting spot where he's at, because he's probably just outside of the top 15. Maybe if you give him a top 15 opponent, that would make sense. But if we don't see that, I don't know who they're going to give him. Maybe Joe Pyfer, right? Maybe Roman Dolidze. I would like to see that fight. I think that would be a really good fight, because both those guys have power. Both those guys are pretty tough, and they both got good grappling. And stylistically, that fight makes sense. And I would really like to see that. Now that I think about it, I really want to see Roman Dolidze versus RoboCop. Maybe it's too high of a step up in competition, but Dolidze ain't this absolute bruiser and berserker at the 185. I mean, he's human, and his skills aren't that good, and that's a winnable fight for RoboCop. So yeah, I would like to see him fight Roman Dolidze next. And then for Brad Tavares, I mean, that's a tough fight. And I actually want to see him fight Bo Nickel next, actually. I think that would be a pretty cool fight. It's a tough ask for Bo Nickel, because Brad Tavares is a tough grappler, and he's going to cause problems on the feet for Bo Nickel and on the ground. And it would be a tough match. But I don't see him winning that fight against Bo Nickel, but it'd be a good step up for Bo Nickel. So yeah, I want to see that fight next. For fights, I want to talk about Ihor Potieria beats Robert Brycek. And I was wrong about Ihor Potieria. He moved down a weight division to the 185 division. And this was a welcome to the UFC moment for Brycek. He couldn't really land anything, and Ihor was kind of like in the flow state the entire fight. And that made it really difficult for Robert Brycek to get anything going in this fight. And we see Ihor Potieria, right? He's been knocked out many times in the UFC, doesn't have the best chin. With a guy like Brycek, who actually has good power, you'd expect, all right, sooner or later he's going to get him out of there. But it just didn't ever happen, and Potieria really took control of this entire fight. And I really like to see that from him because he's actually kind of a pretty big 185er. I mean, he looked really big out there tonight. I wonder how he can do in future fights. So I really like to see that from them. I got that pick wrong, but I'm not mad I got that pick wrong because Ihor looked really good. And, you can just, when you get a fight wrong like that, where you just don't expect the other guy to just be a better fighter, you kind of have to take a step back and be like, wow, that was a pretty good performance. And that's the same way how I feel about the main event too. I come out of this main event fight too with a new sense of happiness for Hermansson, and I'm glad he won, right? Because he was doubted by a lot of people, doubted by a lot of people going into this. A lot of people picked Joe Pyfer, and I like to see that. I really do like to see Hermansson win that fight. But back to Ihor Potieria, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, this guy, he's got one win in the UFC, and it was against Shogun, and he was kind of hated for that because that's a legend, right? And he knocked out a legend, and then got knocked out a couple more times. Yeah, I'm really glad he won this fight. So yeah, got that pick wrong, but great win by Ihor Potieria. Some other fights, Michael Johnson beats Darius Flowers. He just outskilled him, and I kind of figured that was going to happen. Flowers isn't the best fighter, and Johnson's been around for a while. And I'm a big fan of Michael Johnson. This guy's been around for a long time, fought in a lot of our favorite fighters. You either hate him or you don't. There's a lot of, and he's just a hot and cold fighter, right? There's just so much going on with Michael Johnson, but I really do respect him, and I really like Michael Johnson. So that was a great win for him. Rodolfo Vieira submits Arman Petrosyan, and I was wrong about that. I just figured that Arman would keep it standing the entire time and really not let Vieira take him down. But it was evident early that Vieira was there to grapple, and he did very well as he submitted him in the first round. Yeah, and I get that pick wrong. I just had more faith in Arman Petrosyan. When I saw him fight, the last couple times, he's looked good. So that was just a tough one. Yeah. Some other fights, Trevin Giles and Carlos Parates. And Parates beats him by a second round knockout. Giles looked good in the first, good in the second, but ultimately he just got caught. Parates was, kind of a sneaky little contender coming in this fight. I see why now. So I'm going to be on the lookout for him because he's got some serious power. Maybe not the most skilled fighter, but I think he'll be an interesting little prospect. Anthony Smith, Bogdan Guskov knocks out Zach Pauga in the first round. That was my lock of the entire card. I thought that was the one I was most confident in. And it came to fruition with a round one knockout, and I'm happy for him. You just like to see guys who actually want to go out there and finish fights and who can actually finish fights. And he's a rare guy at the light heavyweight unranked division that can really do that. So I'm pretty happy about that. And yeah, so overall on the card, I went 5-4, which isn't the best, and I got the main event wrong. So I'm not too happy about that, but we still are 27-16 on the year. I didn't pick some of these fights because A, they weren't on the card when I originally made the video, or I just didn't know enough about them to pick them. I'm going to start doing that now. If I really, don't care to break down the fight, I'm not going to. But I'm going to for most fights. I just missed a lot of those because I recorded it early, and some of those fights weren't finalized yet. But yeah, next week, big pay-per-view, UFC 298, and my official prediction. will be out soon for that main event, and I'm really excited for that pay-per-view. I think it was better than 297, and it will be. And I'm excited for the main event. And yeah, I mean, every fight in that main card is really, really good, and I'm excited for that. So yeah, until next time,